Dude, that shit's so weird.
So and then what that guy just said?
Yeah.
What Trump just said? He's not supposed to say that. It's classified. Like,
yeah.
what? Why don't you fucking tell us?
Well, I always wonder if they're going to try to do like a Space Force thing, where it's like WMD's the Middle East, we go to the Middle East. Now they're going like, yeah, I think there are aliens, and it's like now we get to do like Space Force shit.
I think if they're aliens, you can't do shit to them.
I know, but it's also like if you want to erect some weird defense thing in outer space so we can spy on China, it's like I think there's probably are aliens by the way. It's like I would imagine there's something.
I would imagine there's something.
Because the government, whenever they start floating out things, like I assume there's like an agenda. I'm like, all right, what are they doing?
100%.
Because they just dropped aliens on us out of nowhere, and everyone was kind of like, okay.
Well, it really started around 2017.
Yeah.
That's when it started to become legitimized, because that was when the New York Times printed this article about it. And they talked about these pilots and their experiences and these videos that they couldn't explain because these crafts had no heat signature and they were flying at ridiculous speeds over the ocean.
Yeah. I remember them just coming out with it, and then like, and then they started doing the UAP thing and all that stuff, and they were like, yeah, there's like unidentified crafts and blah blah blah. So I'm always kind of like, what are they up to?
Yeah, it's weird.
What the hell are these guys up to right
It's
now?
hard to know what's real and what's not real, but when you start talking to pilots and people that have experienced certain things, you just go, wow, what is this guy saying?
Yeah, and I don't deny it. I'm always kind of like, yeah, you probably did see that stuff, but it's like, I don't know, it's like...
Why is it classified?
It's got to be, I would imagine it's military stuff where they're like, we want to use it we want to reverse engineer and use it for our military if this gets into another military's hands, blah, blah, blah. But then they're all spying on each other, so I would imagine they would know too.
Well, the people that I've talked to said that Russia and China both have retrieved crashes.
Really?
Yeah, it's not just America that has them. It's other countries that have them too.
Damn.
Supposedly, this is the big story. Supposedly, there's one that's so big that they can't move it, so they built a building around it. And that's supposed to be in Korea.
What?
Supposedly. That's why I heard it's in Korea. But yeah, this is the lore, that this thing is so big that they couldn't move it, that they had to put a building around it.
Dude, that's wild. That'll be the thing I always think about. If they come out and say, yeah, there's definitely aliens, like, what do people do?
Yeah. This is the building, supposedly?
Whoa.
A giant building in South Korea is often been cited as a potential UFO storage facility. Can you imagine if they just built it the shape of a UFO?
Yeah, it kind of looks like it, honestly.
That's so
like,
crazy.
Dude, do a square building.
What's in that fucking building?
I don't know.
Imagine if that's real.
Yeah, what is this? Why are they, why do they think this?
Well, I would imagine that place would have to be heavily guarded.
Yeah.
There's just a gate. Oh. Who's that guy? Eric Burleson insisted on the existence of aliens, but admitted he has no definitive proof. Okay.
I was talking that video I showed you the other day who said he was going to go look at these places.
He was going to go look in Korea?
He mentioned he was going to go look at the underground one. He didn't say where it was.
Oh, this is the congressman. A congressman's claimed.
Yep,
so
yep.
scroll down there a little lower. So here it is. U.S. congressman has claimed the classified facility housing a UFO is hiding in plain sight. Well, that's kind of hiding in plain sight. They literally made a little antenna on the top, just like this sport model. Look at this sport model. It has that antenna on the top. I don't know what to believe, man, but I know I want to believe.
70 feet diameter, it says.
270 feet in diameter. Holy shit.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, especially now with all the deep fake stuff that's going to come out. Like the next election will be in like deep fake territory. Everyone will be like, you were on the Epstein list. You were on it. No, you were.
Right.
I'm just,
You could have people saying all kinds of things that they've never said.
Or being like, I didn't do that.
Hanging out with people they never hung out. I mean, there was all these photos that were fake of Epstein with a bunch of different people.
Oh, yeah. No, there was a completely fake videos people were sharing.
Yeah.
It's like, so I don't know. By that time, it's like, I've been trying to just pull back completely from like the news, and I'm like,
Hey, what is the official story of the Colbert Show where they had to air that Tallarico interview on YouTube? Because I'm hearing two versions. I'm hearing one version is that CBS wouldn't let them air it because like Trump was involved and the government was involved somehow or another because they're worried about this Tallarico guy, this very charismatic guy in Texas that I really like. He's a very nice guy. I had him on the show. Brian Simpson told me about him. And then the other thing that I'm hearing is no, with FCC equal time rules, if he had Tallarico on, he would also have to have Tallarico's opponent, which is, I think, Jasmine Crockett. Is that true?
I didn't even know
or whoever his opponent is. So I think there's rules like that for the FCC that don't exist for podcasts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, they have to balance it.
Yeah, like if you have this person on that's running for office, you also have to have someone that is opposing them running.
Okay.
They have to have equal time.
I didn't know they had
Is
that.
that true?
So he was on Colbert. Whose show was he on?
Yeah, Stephen
Colbert.
Colbert show.
Okay.
And so they were framing it like it was the government was censoring this guy because and he was saying they're worried that they're going to flip Texas. That's what he was saying. I don't know if that's true though, because I'm.
So it's the different. Honestly, this sounds like it's Colbert saying one thing, CBS lawyers are saying a different thing.
Oh, okay. What are CBS lawyers saying?
They're saying that it's the FCC thing. Colbert says, quote, here, they know damn well every word of my script was approved by CBS lawyers who, for the record, approve every script that goes on the air.
Yeah, but it's not about the script. It's about the humans, the people that are on. If the people are, yeah, here it is. The show provided legal guidance that the broadcast could trigger the FCC equal time rule for 2 other candidates, including Rep. Jasmine Crockett, and presented options for how equal time for other candidates could be fulfilled. So you would have to have equal time. Colbert scoffed at this statement during Tuesday's show. They know damn well every word of my script, but it doesn't have anything to do with the script. Said they don't know damn well that every word of my script last night was approved by CBS lawyers who, for the record, approved every script that goes on the air. Well, that's just diverting because that's not what the subject is. Okay. I got called backstage to get more notes from these lawyers, something that had never, ever happened before. They told us the language they wanted me to use to describe that equal time exception, and I used that language, Colbert said, so I don't know what this is about. He went on to say he wasn't mad at the network and does not want an adversarial relationship. Well, he's on his way out anyway.
Yeah, I
right?
I didn't know he still was doing a show.
Yeah, he's doing it, I think, until like April or May or something. Come on, you're Paramount. No, you're more than that. You're Paramount Plus, he cracked. And for the lawyers to release this statement without even talking to me is really surprising. The host also noted there's been a long, very famous exception to the equal time rule, and that exception included talk shows, interviews with politicians. Oh, interesting. So that makes it interesting. We looked, we couldn't find one example of this rule being enforced for any talk show interview, not only for my entire late-night career, but for anyone's late-night career going back to the 1960s, he said. Colbert said that Carr has not gotten rid of that exception for talk show hosts yet. Maybe CBS was worried that this is a rule and that the government could crack down on them, although no one has ever done that in the past.
Yeah, well,
so this is a different kind of government, right? Obviously.
Yeah.
It's a very adversarial relationship, CBS, or at least the Colbert Show, has already with Trump.
Yeah. Well, what are they worried about? Who is Taylor? What party is Tallarico?
He's a Democrat.
Democrat. And Crockett? What's Crockett?
She's a Democrat as well.
She's a Democrat too. So
yeah.
what is like, oh, they're running against each other.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay. Is Tallarico is the white guy?
He's a guy, his story is very interesting. He was a school teacher.
Okay.
And his story was that he had this kid that was very troubled in his class, but the kid was receiving counseling and was starting to get better. But then budgets got cut, and when budgets got cut, they cut off the counseling, and this kid started fucking off and, acting out and really falling apart, and he wound up getting kicked out of school. Mm-hmm. And it really hurt him because he was like, this kid had like real potential, and he is a teacher,
Yeah.
And so then he decided to run for office and to try to remedy these problems.
Got you. So didn't he just get like jammed up with something now, where like someone claimed they were in his office and that he said something kind of like disparaging about like a black guy?
Tallarico?
He's a very mild-mannered looking guy, right?
Yeah.
There was I don't know if I'm getting my politicians.
See, man, when
but
people are running against people, stories start a-flying.
But it was about another politician. All he said was like, I didn't know I was going up against, this like, I don't know, I guess like whatever word he used, like electrifying black. I thought I was going up against a mediocre black guy. That was it. Some lady claimed that he called Colin Allred a mediocre black man.
Faced allegations that he referred to his opponent, Colin Allred, as a mediocre black man during a private conversation with an influencer. An influencer?
Yeah.
A comment Rep. Tallarico has denied. The allegation caused significant backlash, with Allred calling for supporters to vote for another candidate, Jasmine Crockett. Oh.
Yeah, so it's like...
Yeah, that's a way to get people to not vote for that guy.
Yeah, kind of sucks.
An influencer said it?
An influencer was like, I worked in his campaign, and he was like, if I'd known I was going up against this strong black woman, I wouldn't have known. I thought I was running against a mediocre black man. And then the guy responded being like, nothing about me is mediocre. And, they kind of had it.
Into what the penalty is for the equal time rule, and I don't really see one.
Poor Tallarico's having a tough time,
Maybe
especially if it
fine.
sounds like he's a sweet guy who's like trying to help kids out. And there's,
His name's too close to the guy that killed Epstein.
What was his name?
I keep fucking him up. I keep Taglioni, Tallarico.
That's
I keep confusing them. When I say the killer's name, that cop, I keep saying I think his name is Tallarico. No, Tallarico. No, shit.
It's gonna catch up to him. He's like, I think this guy killed Epstein, actually.
Yeah. The thing is, like, an influencer said, like, what does that mean?
Yeah, look, it's pretty genius though. If you want to do dirty politics, you can just be like.
But what if he said I thought I was going up against this mediocre guy, and now I'm going up against this powerful black lady?
It's not a bad. But then he didn't. He was like, I'd be like, that makes sense.
But he is a black man, so if you're saying mediocre guy and it happens to be a black man, and then that person says he said mediocre black man, like.
Yeah, it's not even that bad of a thing to say.
All we'd have to do is just not say the black part, and he'd be like, "Oh, he's just talking about a politician. The guy's mediocre.
I know.
Happens to be black, but he's mediocre. But as soon as you describe him accurately,
yeah, you're fried. Especially if you're a Dem, man. If you're Dem, you cannot be calling.
No.
Yeah.
He's a religious guy too, which is interesting, but also opposes putting the 10 Commandments in schools.
Okay. That's fair.
He said, I think it's going to push people away from Christianity. He had a very well thought out point about it. We had a really good conversation.
Also, you don't need to be in school and be like, thou shalt not commit adultery. It's like, yeah, dude, they're not going to fuck your wife. Like,
well, it's not that. It's you're pushing this religious religious rules on people, and it's one religion. It's like, what about people that are Buddhists? What about people that are Muslims? What about people that are Mormons? What about you can go down the list forever and ever and ever. Hindus, like, come on.
Yeah, and it's also you can you can kind of summarize it up and like just be nice. I worked in a high school for a while. I was a counselor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I was like I went to school for social work for a while. And,
so like, what kind of counseling would you do?
Just like therapy. It was a really cool. The way they did it was like it was a charter school, and I was there as an intern because I was getting my master's in social work. So they would have interns there as therapists for the school kids, basically, so that the kids could get free therapy at school if they were exhibiting kind of problems or whatever. So it was like I worked at it was like an inner city school in Philly, and I would just go there and chill in an office, and they would just like I'd have to get kids from class, and they would just come. We would like talk a couple times a week. And then you could bring their family in if they had problems at home. You could be like, all right, let's call the mom and dad.
Well, this is what this guy was talking about. This is what Tallarico was talking about. What they cut funding for.
Yeah, it's a shame because this school was like they kind of like ran it themselves. I guess they were getting funded by the state, but the way they got around it was just using interns. So it wasn't like you're not getting like the most experienced people in the world,
but you're getting some help.
You're getting something, man.
Yeah. Well, this kid that he was talking about, like, he had this very detailed story about this kid who was like a good kid, just came from a fucked up house, and he wanted, and these people around him were the only positive influences that he had ever had, and he was starting to get better. Yeah. And then they took it away, and he starts falling apart.
Yeah, and it's also like you forget, like, because there's like for kids when you like, especially you're like in a city. And kids are telling you like their lives, it's fucking heartbreaking. Like the shit, like their day-to-day setup, you'd be like, fucking Christ, man. Yeah. And then they're just looking at you like, what do I do? And I'm like, you gotta hang in there. There's literally nothing I can tell you to do. You just gotta hang in there. And like, it was sad, but it was one of like my favorite. If I didn't do stand-up, I would probably do that for a job. Yeah. I loved it. It was fun.
It sounds very rewarding, right? You're actually helping people.
Yeah, and you have to. It's just like intense. You're just sitting there in a room with somebody, and it's like everything they're saying. There's no like guidance. You have to just be like, all right, well, like maybe this, maybe that, and it's like I don't know. I always liked it a lot. It was pretty cool. But then you go back to the school, and it's so funny. I went to social work school just because I was doing stand up. I was kind of kicking around. I was like, I was doing the podcast, but it was like slow going. And I remember watching Jordan Peterson be like, the schools are crazy right now. And part of me, like, I wanted to be a therapist, but I remember being like, kind of curious, like I wonder how bad they are. And I went to school. I went to my master's program in social work, which was like ground zero for all like the stuff he was talking about. And he was, dude, it was literally like worse than he made it out to be.
What was it like?
It was insane, dude. It was literally like, I went to school again to be a therapist, but like social work, you can be a therapist faster than if you go to school for psychology, because you just like don't need any of the science really. You just study kind of like the theory and, you know, whatever. So you can be a therapist quicker. It's like a shortcut kind of. But it would be like, it was just literally, you'd be in a room with like 13 other people, and they would like, you know, you talk about whatever it'd be. Like, let's talk about like clinical approaches here and there. And it would just right away turn into like race, gender, who's the most oppressed, do this. And it was just like, people would tell stories like, one time this guy said this to me, and everyone would be like, I can't believe that fucking guy said that. It was literally like nothing. You paid $60,000. It was like I would be terrified if I was getting therapy. And again, it's like not everybody, but there's a lot of very people would cry in class. So you'd be like talking, and like people would just start bursting out in tears, like, I don't feel safe. It was insane. And I'm like, dude, you're going to be talking to people who are like homeless? How are you going to help them?
Oh my God.
And it was all female. It was mostly female dominated. It was like me and 3 or 4 other guys. And then like people would come in because you'd bring your case files in and be like, here's something I'm dealing with. Let me get some, you know, what do you think about this? I remember this guy was dealing with this like Vietnam vet who like, you know, had like lived in Philly his whole life. And he was like, I was just shocked the way he talked about women. And it's like, bro, you're dirty macking your client, dude, for these chicks. I'm like, come on, man. It was just kind of weird. It was like, dude, you know, he's a fucking 70-year-old dude. He's lived in Philly his whole life.
He probably stabbed Charlie in a tunnel somewhere.
Yeah, and he was just very crude about women. It's like, come on, man. Of course this guy is.
Yeah.
Don't throw him under the fucking bus. You're supposed to be helping. That was my whole point. It was like, if you're doing therapy with people, it's like, you know, life is just so hard and so complex. And if you're going to be like, this doesn't sit with my party politics, I was like, you guys got to drop the political shit, man, and just like meet these people where they're at.
Well, there's so many guys out there that just want brownie points.
That's what and dude, he's exactly what it was. I was like, dude, I know what you're doing right now. You're dirty macking this guy. So you can be like, personally, I was offended. I'm like, dude.
What do you think about all this stuff about, I mean, the New York Times had articles about it. There's Air Force test pilots have come out talking about encountering flying saucers. Mm-hmm. What do you, or unidentified flying objects, particularly Commander Fravor, who had that
David
tic-tac thing.
Yeah.
What do you think about all that?
Yeah, we do. You know, I'm a shameless marketer. We do an episode on that, on ATIP, on the Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. And look, again, I always say the same thing. I'm not a conspiracy guy. I tend to be very cynical about everything, but. After talking to some of these folks, including Fravor and a handful of others who were both pilots and also were involved in the ATIP program for the U.S. government, for the military, there's things out there that we haven't been able to identify, right? And I'm not jumping on the alien train, right? Necessarily, but what I'm saying is that there are things that extremely experienced pilots, military pilots with significant amounts of experience couldn't figure out, couldn't identify, right? And so I'm certainly not going to be smart enough to say, okay, this is what it was. Was it a foreign government's experimental aircraft? Was it something? I don't know. But what I do know is that the U.S. government took it seriously enough that they developed their own internal program within the Pentagon to try to sort out the wheat from the chaff, right? And say, okay, what do we actually have to worry about? In part because it's a national security issue, right? If there is a aircraft, or if there's something up there that a military pilot sees, for instance, that they can't identify, all right, well, we have an obligation to figure out what that is, because if it's a hostile foreign government's efforts to develop, craft that we don't know about, or propulsion systems we don't know about, then yes, we should be working on that issue. The problem has always been that once you talk about that, then people immediately go, oh, aliens, huh? Area 51, and it kind of gets dismissed. Yeah. But there was a much more serious effort than I knew about before I started working on this thing. And so I don't know. I think I've got an open mind about that. It's like that old thing about how can we really be the only people out here, right? Or life forms out here. I don't know. That seems a little obscure for me to believe.
It seems unrealistic.
Yeah. So, but
when a guy like Fravor, that's the thing. When someone who's that rock solid comes out and tells the story, and he's not deviating from his story. He's not a guy who's trying to make money. He's just, and he doesn't have a history of telling fantastic stories.
And he knew what it meant when he was going to come forward and talk about this. And you've got the gun cameras, and you've got the radar operators who also saw the same thing.
They saw it, and they said it was actively jamming their radar.
Yeah.
which they say, what the fuck? And then the way it moved from 60,000 feet down to like 200 feet in like less than a second.
Yeah, and no signs of any propulsion system.
Yeah.
No, there's several things about that leave you scratching your head. Again, I'm not making a case one way or the other. You know, the point of this is to kind of use the money trail as a way to get inside some of these programs, and then to the degree that you can, to the degree that you can talk about things that are declassified. Not necessarily try to make a case. We're not trying to say it is this or it is that, but I think we're presenting a lot of interesting information that, again, with this situation with Fravor as an example, you come away from it and you think, okay, I'm not dismissing anything at this point. Just it would be I think foolish to or anyway. So interesting stuff. But
was that ever anything that came up during your career?
No. I was pretty much straightforward. Pound the ground through some counterinsurgency operations, counter-narcotics, counter-terrorism operations. We never did any counter-alien things. So right, that was a different operation. That was on a floor we weren't allowed to go onto at the headquarters.
Seems like if we had to admit it was real, if it was something that was real, and we were being contacted on a regular basis, or at least a semi-regular basis, that would change the way everybody feels about everything.
Yes.
Remember when Reagan gave that speech?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I think it was the United Nations. He said, imagine how easily we would come together if we were faced with a threat from an alien world.
Right.
And everybody was like, oh my God, he knows something. Yeah. The aliens.
He's about to spill the beans.
Yeah, that's what we were hoping.
No,
all the UFO dorks like myself.
Well, but think about it. I mean, think if that did come out, which is what part of the allure, right, is the idea that, the government's been keeping this from us for all these years, and you think about what that would mean, not just obviously, oh my God, really, there's something going on out there, but then sort of that breakdown in trust, not that it's not happening already in terms of the government and its ability to, play square. But, look, Area 51. Area 51 was scouted out for use as an experimental, test site for aircraft. And, made perfect sense. Well, then you get all these experimental aircraft being developed out there and flown, some successfully, some not. And, locals, see this shit, locals being a fairly good-sized region because of the distance on these. And, it's understandable how you start getting some of these stories. But, having said that, I sat down with Fravor, right? We talked about this a lot for this one episode, and I talked to several others. And again, I come away and I'm not sure what to think, but again, I'm not closing the book on anything at this point.
See, the way I looked at it is if these were unique expeditions from another planet, or whatever it is that comes here, some alien spacecraft, all they'd have to do is come here once or twice.
Get fed up.
Not even that, but I used to have a bit about it, how Earth is the Tijuana of outer space. They only come down here when they're fucked up and they want to see a show. That's why they don't stay. They just come down and they go, what the fuck? Like, no one's doing any science expeditions to Tijuana.
I'm not going back there. No way. Not unless I'm drunk again.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking that if they were going to come down here and examine us, I mean, they could just do it a couple of times and people have these stories and everybody else dismisses it like, where are they? Where are they? I don't see any aliens.
Yeah.
Because you really wouldn't. And you probably don't. If they're capable of moving at the speed that Fravor described, where it was just impossible to track with the human eye.
They're not going to view us as a threat.
No.
Yeah. They're not
going to. They think we're a threat. I think they're just, I don't know.
They're not going to look at us and say, we want to steal their technology.
It's the most fascinating thing to me. Out of all the weird what ifs and who could do this and how could that be true, the alien one is the most fascinating. Because if that was real, and if we somehow or another one day get some undeniable proof, like the Fravor film, the film footage, the gunner footage, the radar footage, that's pretty goddamn compelling. But man, if there was something off the charts, please tell people your credentials, what your background is.
Sure. So, my name is Ryan Graves. I have an engineering degree, mechanical and aerospace engineering. I promptly left doing that to go fly F-18s for the Navy as soon as I graduated college. Did that for about a decade, both operationally in combat as well as in an instructor role, teaching the new students. And we did witness something while we were flying in our jets, but We were doing it we witnessed it in the context of our just everyday flying and our missions.
And what year was it that you witnessed this?
So we started seeing these in 2014 was the earliest that I know. 2013, late 2013, early 2014.
And could you describe what was the very first experience?
Yeah, so for me personally, the experience was simply just flying out to the area like I would any other day. And instead of seeing an empty airspace with just my wing person or another squadron doing something in a different block, there were all of a sudden a lot of different radar contacts, which is immediately a problem because, we could be hitting one of those or someone working in our area. And this was happening because we upgraded our radar the best we could tell. We were in a earlier radar called the APG-73, and we had come back from deployment. We entered a maintenance phase, it's called. We kind of do a little bit less flying, upgrade the jets if we need to, do any long-lasting maintenance, and we upgraded to the APG-79, which was a much better radar.
And what is the difference in the capabilities of the upgraded radar system versus the original system?
Mm-hmm. So, kind of practically speaking, it's like going from an analog TV essentially to like an OLED. It's, a digital modern tool compared to more of like an analog classical radar that has more limited range and has less ability to track multiple targets and things of that nature. So just generally speaking, we would expect to see, more objects if there were any out there or smaller objects, but there shouldn't have been any objects out there.
And so how far offshore are you when this is all going down?
Our working areas start about 10 miles off the coast, and then it goes out 100 or 250 miles or so, though we don't usually use those far eastern areas. But we would only see them over the water. So they would really only be in our working areas, maybe slightly in between the working area and land, but never over the land. Sometimes over the bays that are in the area that are quite large. But never just kind of zooming west over land or anything like that.
And is this restricted airspace?
It's not. So that's a tricky question. For us operating in a military operating area, it is not restricted in the sense that you have to be there's only one person allowed in there. You could have these little Cessnas kind of bumbling in there, but they would get called out pretty quick, both from the kind of air traffic control agency that's working out there, as well as the F-18s and the other aircraft that may be working out there. But in a broader sense, when we look at it in relation to our air defense identification zone, which is essentially a band of airspace that surrounds our entire country, if your flight path originates out over the water outside of that ADIZ and you proceed into that ADIZ, into our controlled airspace, then you do have to essentially have permission to enter that airspace. It's not a restricted airspace like a traditional bombing range, but it is protected airspace. It's our coastal air.
So you have this upgraded radar system, and what are you detecting?
So on the radar, really what we can learn from that is essentially the kinematics of the object. So where is it essentially, and what direction is it going, how fast is it going, things of that nature. We can't necessarily make out the shape or things of that nature. So it's a representation. It's like a block on our screen to show that information. And so when we see that on our radar, we can tell, where it's located, perhaps what's located around it if there's other objects we're detecting, how fast it's going, what direction it's pointed in, what direction it's traveling in. So we call that velocity vector. So if we see this essentially little circle, it'll have a tail coming off of it. And that tail kind of represents the nose of the vehicle, at least as its flight path is going. And so with that, we would typically see an aircraft just kind of trudging along with a straight line, taking occasional turns. But these objects had a little bit more of a, I don't want to say random, but more less controlled flight path. That velocity vector would kind of jump around a bit more. They would not proceed in like a perfectly straight line as you would imagine like a flight navigation computer would take you, right? It takes you from A to B in the straightest line possible. These objects seem to kind of be moving in a direction that was not a straight line, but generally proceeding in that direction. And so they would kind of be meandering slightly, but moving in that general direction, both three-dimensionally and horizontally. So
winding around, going up, going down. Mm-hmm. So they're not on a flat plane, and they're not going in a straight line.
So I don't want to draw too many firm statements like that because we would see them being flat too. We'd see them perfectly stationary up there, regardless of the wind.
Really?
Yep.
Wow. So what kind of wind are you talking about?
Oh, gosh. I mean, at altitude, you can have anywhere up to 100, 120 knots of airspeed.
What is that in miles per hour?
It's about 100, 130, 140 miles an hour.
So they're completely stationary with 140 mile an hour wind.
Correct.
How would something do that?
It's confusing to me as well. Even if we had something that could just burn that much energy, right? Like if you had a sphere surrounded by little rockets, right? Just imagining something right now.
Okay.
And if you wanted to keep that perfectly stationary, right, against gravity, you could just fire all the rockets at the bottom really fast and hopefully keep it flat, right?
Right.
It's going to have tiny little variations. And then if you have wind hitting it and all this, you could potentially have those rockets try to counter it, but it would never be perfectly still in winds like that.
Because the wind's not perfectly still either, right?
Exactly.
It changes and varies.
It does. So it's almost like it's the wind. It's not even really fighting the wind, it seems. You know, it just seems like it's just there in a way.
Wow. So the first time you see these things, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, the first time really was, well, you know, what is this, right? It's not a UFO or something mysterious at this point. It's at what we're thinking at this point we see on the radar is just, well, our radar is broken, right? These perhaps don't represent physical objects yet because we hadn't, you know, visually seen these or seen them on our camera yet. And so, you know, we kind of like, hey, you know, what's going on here? You know, is anyone else seeing this kind of thing? But not really like investigating it, right? It's just kind of like, all right, there was stuff out there, but maybe next time we'll take a look. But the way our systems work, when we have all these contacts on our radar, and if we kind of just select one out with our little cursor there, all our sensors go to it. Our FLIR goes to it, which is our camera system. All our weapons, they have like their own little eyes in some sense, and they all look in that direction. And so eventually, you know, someone had one of these selected and flew close enough so that as they look at their FLIR system, their camera, they could see something that was at the spot represented on the radar, right? So there was something there.
So they were seeing it visually with their own eyes?
Not at this point, just on the FLIR system.
The FLIR system.
And so it's a regular camera and also an infrared camera. And so typically we'll roll around in infrared just because it returns a better image, typically. So yeah, you know, it didn't look like an object they were seeing on the FLIR. It just looked like a source of IR energy in a sense, almost as if someone was shining a flashlight. But something had to be there to be reflecting that energy or creating it. So at this point, to answer your question, now we're like, okay, this isn't just an error in our radar. This is perhaps, you know, we're thinking this is real. We have to really respect this as like a safety hazard now. Even if it's just a small, you know, however small ribbon of tinfoil, right? Like that suck down the engine can still take out an aircraft, right? So we have to be very respectful of that.
Like a Mylar balloon type thing?
Potentially, right? Yeah.
But how fast are these things going?
So sometimes stationary, right? Sometimes they would be going around 0.6 to 0.8 Mach, which is at altitude about, you know, 240 to maybe 330 knots, you know, around there.
So somewhere in the range of an airplane.
Yeah, a fighter aircraft would be kind of flying around at those airspeeds, except sometimes they would be perfectly stationary as well.
Right. So it's not exhibiting any sort of patterns that you've recognized in the past.
No, they have actually. So although
with the stationary, no, right?
Correct. With the stationary, no. With the meandering kind of flight path, no. But I would also see them essentially fly what we call a racetrack pattern. And essentially what that means is they fly in a straight path, and then they do like a 180-degree turn in a certain direction. Then they fly a straight path, then turn again. You know, so that's what we call a racetrack pattern as opposed to a circular holding pattern. We did witness racetrack patterns. In fact, I think there's been some cases off the West Coast just the past couple of weeks where people have also been observing objects flying in racetrack patterns high at altitude with lights. So I do recognize that behavior, but I don't necessarily think that means we have to attribute it to normal behavior necessarily. That type of flight path is important because it's a very efficient way to fly, right? If you have to maintain the position in a certain area, you want to minimize how much you're turning. Because anytime you're turning in an aircraft, you're using more energy than if you were just flying straight and level. And so by having a racetrack pattern, it's an efficient way of holding in a position by maximizing straight and level time and minimizing your turn time.
And how long would these things stay up there for?
So from our experience, and again, we weren't studying these, but they were always out there. They were
Always.
out there when we took off. We'd see them, and then we go to land, they would still be out there.
Like every day?
Every day.
Every day?
Every day.
So you guys go from not having any idea that these things are out there to an upgraded radar system to seeing them every day.
Yep.
What is the thought? Like, how are you feeling when these, like, is there an evolution of the thought pattern of how you're addressing these things and thinking about them? Initially, you're thinking they're errors. When do you start getting a thought that, like, what the fuck is this thing?
Yeah. So that happened when we visually saw one. And the first time we visually saw one, the object was directly at what we call the entry point of the area. So, that box that I told you about in the sky that starts 10 miles off the coast, there's a particular GPS, location and altitude where incoming traffic will fly in, and outbound traffic will fly in the exact same spot, but will fly out 1,000 feet lower. There were 2 aircraft from my squadron, VFA-11, and they flew, took off as a flight of 2. That means they're essentially flying in a formation like this. And as they hit the area, one of these objects went right between the aircraft. The lead air crew saw the object. The Dash 2 aircraft crew did not, which is not surprising because they're usually, you're very focused on flying formation. You're just staring right at that aircraft. The lead really has actual leeway to look around. So he saw it, and, he immediately came back. I have to assume he didn't have it on his radar because he wouldn't have flown through this object at the entrance point. He turned around, flew back, landed, and I was in the ready room when he come back, and he had all his gear on, which typically is not a good thing because you want to get that stuff off as fast as possible. So usually means there's a problem of some nature, and he was just sitting there saying, "Hey, I almost hit one of those damn things." And we all knew what he was referring to, even though we didn't necessarily have a name for it, just because we were seeing these so much. And he described it. He described it just as a black or dark gray cube, and that cube was inside of a clear or translucent sphere. And essentially, the apex or the corners of that cube, best he could tell, were touching that inside of that sphere.
And that description mirrors many of the descriptions that people have had of these, whatever you want to call them. Whether they're calling them UAPs now for some strange reason. UFOs, I don't know, does it have a dirty connotation to it? And is it tainted because of so many crazy people talk about UFOs? Is that what it is?
It does come with a lot of assumptions baked in.
It baked in. So that's something, but whatever it is, that is a design that people have reported seeing before. That this translucent sphere and this cube, can you see through the cube?
Not to my understanding, no.
So it's some sort of solid black cube that's inside this translucent sphere.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just floating around and flying around the sky.
So, that's a good point. Is it floating around? Is it flying around? It's doing both, which is strange, right? Because you could think of that description and go, okay, that's kind of some kind of weird balloon maybe with stuff in it. And that's certainly, one way. If you just view that angle of it, then it seems explainable. But when that, the balloon-like object starts cruising down at, 0.8 Mach, that nullifies that particular idea. And you'll see that a lot where it's not just like that one picture, that one behavior. It's really, you kind of have to zoom out a bit and look at everything in relation to each other and say, okay, why is this weird? Okay, it was hanging out in a racetrack pattern. That's not exotic. But when you learned it was doing it for, perhaps 13 hours.
13 hours?
Perhaps they were out there all the time, So, I land and I go back. And we weren't on a intel mission to analyze these, right? We're going to do our training. It's very expensive, $30K an hour to fly these things, right? So really the only time we can put energy into looking at these things is when we're kind of transiting back and forth or waiting for a fight to start. And so, it's never like a dedicated analysis.
One of the things that I want to talk to you about is the JFK files. And one of the things that you said was that if they showed you what they showed me, this was your quote, you wouldn't want people to know it either.
So I opened them up partially. I was met with, from good people, good people. People that were well-meaning. Mike Pompeo was one of them. He's a good person. They called me. They said, "Sir, would rather have you not." And I did open them, but I was asked by some people not to open them. There's a Martin Luther King file too, by the way, that they'd like to see. I don't know if you know, but there is that. But JFK in particular. So they called me. A lot of good people called me. People that that you would find reasonable people, and they asked me not to do it. So I said, "Well, we'll close it for another time." But if I win, I'm going to open them up. I'm just going to open enough.
Why didn't you open it up the first time?
Because
though?
a lot of times,
what was the hesitation? Though?
Addresses, people that are still living. There are people that are affected, and there could be some national security reason that I don't have to necessarily know about. But some very good, talented people asked me not to do it. I opened it up, and then they said, "Would it be possible for us to do that a different day?"
How much of it did you read into?
I think it's going to be just fine to open it. Let me put it that way. I think it's fine. It's going to be time. It's a cleansing. It's really a cleansing. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it immediately, almost immediately upon entering office.
Well, the thing, when people look at it from the outside and you sort of imagine what could be a reason why they would not release those files, it would be there's people that were implicated in the assassination.
Yeah. Well, when there are living people, you generally tend not to want to do it. When people are still living.
Living people that formerly work for the government.
And living people that were somehow involved in it, and you tend not to do that. But it's time to open them. I can't tell you whether or not they're going to find anything of interest. And I did partially open. I think I've opened 50%, but I was asked not to do it, and I thought that was a reasonable ask, but now I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it very soon. There's a lot of interest in it.
One of the things that
there's a lot of interest in the people coming from space,
Yes.
And I know you're interested in that.
Oh, I'm very interested in that. How much did they tell you about that?
A lot.
Really?
Yeah.
What did they tell you? How much can you tell?
So
how's that work? Is it like super top secret?
I can tell,
Tell me.
Well, based on Hunter Biden, I can say whatever the hell I want, right? But no. But I interviewed a few people. It's never been my thing, I have to be honest. I have never been a believer. I have people that Area 51 or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. I think it's the #1 tourist attraction in the whole country or something. Area 51 in Las Vegas. Do you know that, right?
Sure. I know what it is.
So anyway, but it's a big tourist thing. So I interviewed jet pilots that say they saw something. If you saw them, you'd love to have them as
I've had a couple in here. Commander David Fravor.
Yeah.
I had him in, who had that sighting in 2004. Very compelling with video evidence, radar evidence. Ryan Graves.
I don't believe his name, but I interviewed jet pilots that were solid people. Perfect. I mean, great pilots, great everything. And they said, "We saw things, sir, that were very strange. Like a round ball, but it wasn't a comet or a meteor. It was something. And it was going 4 times faster than an F-22, which is a very fast plane, And it was round, which is, in theory, a great shape.
So when you were talking to these people, was this something that you were compelled to have conversations about? Was this your personal interest?
No, a little bit. It's not a great interest for me, but it's a little interest. I get that question as much as almost any question. Do you think that we have aliens coming, flying around or whatever?
What do you think?
There's no reason not to. I mean, there's no reason not to think that Mars and all these planets don't have life, because
Mars, we've had probes there and rovers, and I don't think there's any life there.
Well, maybe it's life that we don't know, but
maybe there was life there at one point in time. This is the speculation about Mars, that Mars had an atmosphere at one point in time, a long time ago, that could support life. It also had large bodies of water, but we've had no evidence of even bacterial life that exists on Mars. But the universe is pretty vast. It's not been a big thing
for me. I mean, when I looked at what China did to this, they would have never done it with me, where they put the balloon up, and a lot of people thought for a little while that was one of these things. So,
that's a lot of the speculation too, that some of these drones that hover over battleships, that these are Chinese drones, and that they're not UFOs.
They could be also.
There's some super sophisticated.
But I did interview, let's say 3 or 4 guys and without tremendous interest, if you had them. As I said, you'd love to have them as your children. Solid, beautiful people. They said, "Sir, there's something there." You know,
There's something there.
They've said it, yeah.
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few of
They're
them.
not conspiracy guys.
Well, I mean, just the Commander David Fravor thing in 2004 off the coast of San Diego, they clocked that thing going from 50,000 feet above sea level to 50 in a second.
Yeah.
They don't know what it is.
That's tough to beat.
Yeah, they saw something in the water. It was hovering over that something that was making a disturbance in the water. They got video evidence of this thing. 2 different fighter jets with pilots in them saw it. There's, visual evidence, photographic evidence, video evidence, radar evidence. Whatever the hell it is, it moves in a way that would turn a human being into jello if they were inside of it. The G-force, no one would survive.
Oh,
so like, what is that? And we don't. It doesn't have a heat signature. They don't know what their propulsion system was. But
when you fly in some of these jets, these pilots have to be in great shape.
Oh yeah, I flew with the Blue Angels once.
Yeah,
yeah, I got to fly. I guess
and
it's
those
an
are
FA-18.
older, and those are older machines.
And they're crazy.
When you fly in some of these things,
oh my
it's
God,
amazing. Yeah, but
yeah, I can imagine.
You got to be special.
So you're obsessed with UFOs, right? Is that safe to say?
It's safe to say, but it's not so much just the UFO itself. I mean, I don't call them that anymore. We call these advanced aerial threats. They're different, but
threats.
You honed in on a word we weren't supposed to really get into here in the first part of the show.
Did you have a plan?
I have a very long plan, detailed plan. We're going to start with my body. We're just going to talk about my body for a lot. And
okay, what do you want to talk about when it comes to your body?
Well, my body is interesting. It's unique.
Okay.
And it changes shape. And what I've noticed is it's just changing.
Yeah, it's getting larger.
Larger, getting wider.
Depending upon what you put in it.
But you're all. Can I cuss?
Yeah, for sure. We're on the internet.
You're so fucking fit. You shook my hand. I think you're gonna break my hand.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just don't be strong.
I didn't mean to.
Don't be so handsome.
Just shaking
and strong.
your hand. Just thought it was a handshake.
I know. Well, it's one of those power moves. You ever see when Trump shakes people's hands and he pulls them in and he's like,
yeah, he does do weird shit.
He does
right?
weird shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to do that. I just meant to shake your hand like a man.
Well, I took it as like, know your place, motherfucker.
Oh,
this is my show.
I didn't think that.
No, I'm just joking.
Interesting. So. When did you get obsessed with this aerial threat thing? And why do you call them threats?
We'll get into that, I guess.
Okay.
But I got into it when I was in junior high. For some weird reason, I had like some time off and I went to the school library in like 7th grade, and I was like, damn, I gotta read some boring shit. What am I gonna read? And I saw this one book, and it had a picture of the Loch Ness Monster and like a UFO. I'm all, that looks cool. And I read that, and I was like, holy cow, these are like real. It wasn't all science fiction. I mean, the way the book was laid out, I was like, these are like real events. I'm all, there's no way, really? And then when the band started doing its thing in the back of the van, there were no like smartphones, so we were buying books. And I would just lay there. We'd have like 20-hour drives. And so I started buying books on the UFO phenomenon. And I was, once you do that, it's a black hole, you're done.
Yeah, it's definitely a rabbit hole. You get sucked into it. At my house, I have a framed poster that's the cover of the Roswell Daily News.
Yeah.
That shows the day after the Roswell crash, where it says that the Air Force came and recovered the wreckage, and the whole deal. I've been obsessed with this shit since I was a little kid.
Yeah, I think that's by design. I think that this generation was meant to have this stuff come out. But I can't prove that. That's just my feeling.
What makes you feel that? Like,
because of exactly what you said. There's a lot of people. I don't believe that some of the events happened on accident. I think that there's been a lot of events that are on purpose. Some have been for show. Some have been for. There's a variety of reasons, but I think a lot of it is a control system that's really pushing humanity in a very specific direction. And
so like they've got a time frame where they've had these events take place. Is that what you think?
Yeah, and they also time travel, which is different than what people think in like a movie where they sit in a machine and all of a sudden you're in the 1930s and you got to go save humanity. When you use the technology, there's a time difference between what they're doing inside of an artificially created bubble of gravity of sorts, and then what's on the outside. So if you're on the inside of one of those machines, everything would be skewed more black and white. There would be like a red shift, and everybody would look frozen. So you literally could fly around and grab a Coke out of someone's hand and put it in someone else's hand. It's really...
Where are you getting this from?
Well, take a wild guess. Look at the people I'm surrounded by,
So the people you're surrounded by are telling you this? Is that what it is?
Well, I don't want to get into that, but the people I'm surrounded with and myself, are very close to this stuff. But the physics, the physicist that's a co-founder of my company, To the Star, he's a Nobel nominee. He wrote the book on plasma physics.
What's his name?
Hal Puthoff, Dr. Hal Puthoff. And he created remote viewing. Do you know what remote viewing is?
Yeah.
He's the creator of the CIA psychic spy program, but he also has done like really exotic, advanced, forefront propulsion work for the past decades and decades. Actually, I mean, he's deep into the quantum this and that. So he's the one that actually told me about the redshift. Yeah.
And so they have experienced this physically, or is this just theoretical, or they know that it exists? Like
the technology?
Yes.
I believe that the technology not only exists, we've figured out how to play with it, but I'm not going to really get into that here. That is what we're doing at my company, though. That is the announcement. So Steve Justice was head of advanced programs at the Skunk Works, and the Skunk Works are who built, the famous secret bases you hear about. Skunk Works did, the U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117 stealth fighter, and
it's all Groom Lake out there,
all
right?
that kind of stuff. And he literally was in charge of all the advanced programs. So you got the boss, and you got him, and he came. He just finished his career over there within the past 2 months, I think it is, and he was on stage with me when we came out and said we're going to be building one of these things.
So when you say that all this technology exists, have they explained this to you, or have you seen it physically?
Oh, I haven't seen anything physically like that. I wouldn't be allowed to go anywhere if that does or doesn't exist.
So they've just explained to you that this exists. And that this is in the hands of the U.S. government?
I think no. I don't want to get into that kind of stuff, but if you don't mind.
But why is it that you want to not get into certain things?
Well, I don't want to I represent more than myself these days.
Right.
So I definitely have to watch what I say.
Well, who do you represent when you say you represent more than yourself?
The team that I'm with. So when you look at the people that are a part of my company, it's Undersecretary of Defense and Senior Intelligence Service.
Is there a list of these people that we could see?
Oh, yeah. I thought you guys would have had that.
Yeah, but I mean, is there a list where folks could see it online?
Yeah, they can go to tothestarsacademy.com and scroll down, and you'll be able to see who they all are. So
how did you get linked up with all these people?
That story might be a better way to start, because a lot of people don't know this part of the story, and I think you're going to find it pretty fucking odd as well. But okay, so we'll back up a couple years. So I was obviously, I started the band Blink, and Blink went places, and then, but we always had a weird band relationship, like most bands, and we also thought that we would never be big, so we started companies on the side, and I had a company that incubated a lot of small startups, like software and apparel and hardcore skate surf companies and stuff like that. Well, I learned a lot from that, and I pulled out an entertainment startup called To the Stars. And I knew I was going to be doing kind of like science fiction franchised stories, just like Disney, but science fiction for adults. And what that means is, I make a story, I title it, I brand it, and I put out the book, and I put out the merchandise, and I go make a movie, and it's a vertically integrated kind of model. Well, one of the stories I knew I wanted to put out was Secret Machines, which was kind of a historical fiction, but based on real events about the UFO phenomenon. But I also knew that I knew shit that most people don't know, because I've studied it for so long, and I happen to put some pieces together that most people don't put together. So before I came out with that book, and before I came out with the plan to take that, make major motion pictures and all that kind of stuff, I knew I needed to ask permission. So I flew around to places. I can't say who they were, but they listened to my pitch, and then I got a email out of nowhere that says meet us next to the Pentagon at this day and time, and I did that. And from
You
that
got an
point,
email from just a random person?
No, I just can't tell you who it's from.
Okay.
And so then I go out.
Meet you next to the Pentagon? She just flew to the Pentagon?
I flew out to Pentagon City. Yeah. It's dude, this
Were you
gets.
freaking out?
I'll tell you when I started freaking out. There's more shit. It gets way worse. This is nothing. So that started me out near DC taking some other high level meetings, and there was somebody at a very high level that closed the door, looked me in the eye, and says, "Okay, I'm going to introduce you to somebody." And that person comes to San Diego, puts me on the phone with a general, and the general is listening to my little stump speech about what I want to do with this franchise, because I definitely didn't want to, I wasn't looking to like force disclosure, and I wasn't looking to be rogue and break secrets. I was like, look, I know what's going on here, and you guys are doing a kick-ass job, and I would have done the exact same thing should I have been the guy at the top that had to make some really hardcore decisions 70 years ago. So I want to support you. I think people are cynical because there's a vacuum. You guys can't say what you're doing. So all these people are just coming up with a bunch of bullshit to say, oh, they don't want us to know, or we can't handle it, or it's all about oil and money and all this weird shit.
But you had put these pieces together independently.
I did.
And so based on books that you read?
Yeah, people think that like places like the CIA and the DIA, all these intelligence organizations have, a monopoly on information. They don't. They get their information from the real world too. They do have access to archives of information. They do have access to some amazing, satellite data and stuff like that. But if you're smart and you take your time, you know where to look, and you find patterns, you can pretty much put together all the same shit they can, kind of, and that's what I did. And so when I pitched what I wanted to do, he said, come up and meet me tomorrow. And so I flew up to NASA, actually, NASA Ames, and had a 2-hour meeting there. And after 2 hours, that person says, he looks me in the eyes, I'm going to introduce you to someone else. And he did. And so I got on the phone with this person, and this person, goes, I'm a skeptic. And then at the end of the conversation, he goes, fly out and see me. And so I did. And that's when things really started happening. So I fly out to this airport, and I sit at a table in a restaurant at the airport. No one's in there. And this gentleman sits down, and the waiter comes up. He waves off the waiter, and he looks me in the eye and says, it was the Cold War, and we found a life form. And that's when I started shitting my pants, because I know a lot about this stuff, but you always wait to talk to somebody that is one of the inside people. You always want to have...
So he sits down at a restaurant with you at the airport and tells you that they found a life form.
Yes. And
during the Cold War?
During the Cold War. And everything that they did and every decision they made at the time was because of the consciousness of the Cold War.
And why has this guy decided to meet with you at an airport?
Because the only way you meet with these people, the only way you ever would have anyone talk to you is if you can provide a service that they need. Mm-hmm. And my service was pretty interesting to them, because I said, look, you guys, you struggle with saying disclosure. You want to tell everybody everything, which I don't think everyone should know everything. And then you say they can't handle it, so don't tell them anything, And I'm like, there's a middle road there. And here's the way I would do the middle road. And it resonated with them, And so we had a pretty epic conversation for like 2 hours.
Why you? Like, why? What is it about what your message was?
Because
what your idea was that made them want to tell you some top secret shit that they've tried to keep away from the American people. Well, I mean, you take a guy who's like a big celebrity who's in a huge rock band like you, and you just say, hey, meet me in an airport. I'm going to tell you about a life form that we found during the Cold War, because you're famous, or because you know things?
No, because I have a service. So it's not. It sounds easy when you play it like that, but
service. A
service. Like, what can you do for them that they need help with?
And what could you do?
Communication. They don't have a way to make a movie, a book. They don't know how. Don't have a way to make documentaries. They don't have a way to go on a big show like this and communicate with young people. They don't do that, and nor should they. They look at. You got to look at what they're doing.
So they look to you for a spokesperson role?
I wouldn't say spokesperson role.
Communication role?
A communication role. It makes more sense.
So they would give some information to you, and you would get it out to people. And now, why wouldn't they do it themselves? Because they wouldn't have the same platform?
They don't have
access to the same platform that you would have?
And the other reason is people have tried to do movies and stuff like this, but none of them know I was fortunate enough to know the core story, and most people don't.
So explain that then, if you don't mind going back. Like
Sure.
when you said that you were able to put things together that other people weren't. What are those things?
Essentially, it's the book Secret Machines, where you have a lot of private finance, you have some world bankers, and you have a lot of people internationally working together to figure out a plan of how to push back against something that's been coming here for a very long time, but using off the books finances and using mechanisms that we're not totally aware exist. And what people have to realize is, the UFO phenomenon isn't a phenomenon. There's the universe is fucking gigantic, and there's life everywhere. Every fucking where. And there's a lot of life that's way more advanced than we are. And just like Voyager left our solar system a little dinky satellite from the 70s, and just like my company's going to be building, this electromagnetic craft that really can do the same thing to time that I've been telling you about. Other civilizations have that too, which means you can traverse those distances of space. And what you have to think about is what happened when we first discovered that, and what did we do about it? And there's no, you got to look at 47 in a very peculiar way. 90 days after the Roswell event, CIA was created, the Air Force was separated from the Army, the National Security Act was created, and all those things are mechanisms to start learning more and to start getting private industry off the ground.
So that had nothing to do with World War II. You think it had to do with aliens?
Oh, I absolutely think it. Well, both, because what I believe crashed at Roswell was, I believe it was German from Argentina, but it had hallmarks and technology based on alien technology. So we put out a story saying it's alien, and then we put out a story saying it's a weather balloon. But the real thing it was, we didn't want anyone to guess, and that's why we put those two things out there. And that's kind of how they do it. I think they did that with the moon. It's like, we went to the moon, and then they put out this meme kind of thing, like we didn't go to the moon, but they didn't want people really going, well, what's on the moon? That so these things are managed until they can figure it out, because you got a bunch of normal dudes in suits sitting at a big table like this, and it's their fucking responsibility to figure this thing out. And this shit is monumentally big. But back to
how would they manage this then? If these regular dudes without access to communication like you have, how have they managed to disseminate this information and sort of confuse everybody?
I think, I can tell, I don't know how they did it. I do know that they infiltrated UFO groups. That was the very first thing they did in the 50s.
Sort of like how FBI agents and undercover cops infiltrated Occupy Wall Street and pretended to be radical hippies and started fights. Yep,
they did that. They get access to what the civilians are learning, how information transfers from one group to another, and then they start deflecting all their knowledge and putting in leaks and this and that, and getting them off the main track, not because of a disdain for citizens and not because of any other reason than picture ISIS. We don't know what ISIS is. They got a nuclear bomb, and we caught a guy trying to sneak in this bomb.
Right.
Are they going to stop and come sit on your couch and tell you all about it? No. And if you're like on the radio and there's all these people going, oh my God, we're going to die, a bomb, a bomb, a bomb. They'll hold up a second. You're not going to fucking die, but we need to learn more about this, and we got to figure it out before we sit down and talk to you about it.
When I was stationed at Portland Air National Guard, my job there was an airfield manager, so I would interface and work a lot with the F-15 pilots at the unit. And so there had been an airspace incursion that had taken place when I was still at the time at the Guard. And I remember kind of talking to some of the pilots about it, and I was like, what was that? And they're like, we can't really talk about it. No one really wanted to address it. And so from what I had gathered, that had been likely a UAP. And so that kind of was my perspective. Granted, I also grew up in the generation of the X-Files and, I don't know if you remember 94 Independence Day. So, for me specifically, I didn't look at it with, a crazy lens and perspective. I'm like, you never know if, we're the only ones out there, essentially.
But why did you assume that if it's a top secret incursion that he couldn't talk about, that it wasn't just a military craft from another country?
Because of the way that he was discussing it.
What did he say?
So he had been, he didn't want to, from what I gather, get taken off flight status. And he's like, I really can't discuss it. We couldn't really identify it essentially, and it had outperformed them.
So when you say that it operates outside our understanding of physics, what specifically are you saying? What happened?
To I guess break it down in simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, these energy things have.
Energy things? What do you mean?
Well, they call them interdimensional beings. I think that they can actually operate through the time spaces that we currently have. And that's not something that I came up with on my own. That's based on stuff that we've seen. That's based on information that we've been told. And then also, too, I think that there's this historical aspect of, this gets into the deeper theories and concepts of religion, and I think the history that we currently know, and that kind of spins off into another topic of, you have the modern day Bible, you have this aspect of Bibles or books of the Bible that have been removed that explain and kind of touch on these topics. And I think that we're in a time and age where you have such a vast amount of information that we have access to via social media, via your cell phone, via the internet. And so it's really changing the way that we understand, the origins of life and the spiritual reality that we know.
When you
currently
say interdimensional beings, that they know that these are interdimensional beings, how do they know that?
Based on testimony would be based on witnesses that have come forward. But what I can tell you is
So the witnesses just were told that they were
No,
interdimensional?
that they've seen things. And what I can tell you without getting into classified conversations is that there have been incidences that I believe where very credible people have reported that there have been movement outside of time and space.
That's very vague.
Yeah. So, look.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Look. Have I seen a portal open? No. Have I seen a spaceship? Personally, no. Have I seen evidence of this? Yes. Have I seen photo documentation of aircraft that I believe were not made by mankind? Yes. Is there historical significance to this? Yes. Is there multiple events that go back to, I would argue, maybe even before the time of Christ that have documented this in text? Yes. So do I believe that the government has access to certain technology? Yes, to an extent. And I believe that certain contractors potentially have back engineered this tech. I think that that's what can explain the advancements that we're seeing. But I also believe that this is a dangerous level of hidden information from the American people, because if you have an aspect of the federal government, which I can tell you, I, with two other members of Congress, were denied access to information at Eglin Air Force Base pertaining to whistleblowers because of the fact, and we can get into that story and what happened at Eglin in a second, but we were denied access and told that we don't have security clearance or the read-in authority on a special access program. That's a problem, because I'm supposed to represent and be an investigative body, and you have then people who are unelected that are operating basically in secrecy, and that's a problem. That's a big problem.
And so how do these people have the authority to do that?
I think it's been decades of classified secret information, then also this aspect of the intelligence community that's been empowered. And it's kind of serendipitous with timing, because when you talk about the intelligence communities and what they've done essentially to the trust in this country with the American people, I think this goes all the way back even into JFK, with how they basically have operated outside of the purview of Congress and basically, to an extent, have gone rogue up until recently. You're seeing a big push and pull to try to rein in these intelligence agencies currently.
Yeah. So what I want to bring it back to evidence. You said that you've seen evidence. Like, what kind of evidence have you seen?
I have seen photos. I have seen...
what have you seen photos of?
So I was in a skiff, and I can't discuss all that was in a skiff, but what I can tell you is based on the photos that I've seen, I'm very confident that there's things out there that have not been created by mankind.
It seems crazy that people have access to information that shows that there's something outside of us that is more intelligent, at least more capable than we are, and they hide it from everybody else.
What I can tell you is that when you have thousands upon thousands of people around the planet throughout time that have reported something.
Right.
to say that those people are crazy, to say that, the whole concept of even just asking the question that you might not necessarily be psychologically sound, that in itself, that's a disinformation campaign to get people to shut up about it. And that's a problem. We know that the U.S. government has not exactly been clean, and a lot of what they've done with the American people, specifically to the topic of UFOs.
Which makes you think that it's probably because there's something there. If you think about the motivation they had with Project Blue Book, when J. Allen Hynek was running Project Blue Book, this specific intention was to discredit all stories.
And he ended up ultimately, though, after all of his investigations, becoming someone that was like, I think there's something here. But that's true. By the way, a lot of people might not necessarily go onto Google and look up that information, but you can actually look up the declassified reports from Project Blue Book. What's also interesting, though, is when we're talking about tech, right? The ability for this tech, being that it exists, to change dependence for entire governments on things like fossil fuel, et cetera. It's look, I think everyone has a moral obligation to do what they think is right, okay? And so if you're in a position of power and you see something wrong and you're not addressing it, I think, this in itself, getting the truth out there for people to decide for themselves. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just telling you in our investigations and what we are pushing for in regards to transparency. I would like to see the federal government roll out some of the stuff that we've been given access to, because I think that information belongs in the hands of the American people.